Ladies and gentlemen, it is June 5th, and we are finally here to our preseason divisional round team rankings for the 2024 NFL season. It's my favorite time of the summer. We kick this series off, and it takes us about 8 to 10 weeks to get through each division. But I love it because we really get to kind of dive into each division in detail, walk through some of their Vegas win totals, some of their Vegas odds to win the division, what our projections say, and more. So just happy to be here. We're getting closer and closer to the NFL season. Brendan and I drafted our first best ball team the other day, so getting a little taste of paradise already. So Brendan, how are we doing, man?
Yeah, that best ball team was maybe a little weak. I think our first one last year was not great either. Anyway, I want to draft those every single day of my life. So Peyton should thank you for holding me accountable on that. I'm doing great. I feel like I know everything once again. It's that time of year where I can't go wrong. So, it's just good feeling. We're good.
Yeah, I agree. And, last year we nailed a lot on the head with some divisions. We also widely missed on some divisions. But luckily this division last year in particular, we nailed. So I'm hoping we can do so again this year. We called the Texans and the Colts going over their win totals of 5.5 and 6.5. So that was a breeze. We also called the Jaguars going under their win total last year of 9.5. So that was also easy. We caught a lot of shit for that one, but it was a sweat, but I'm glad it ended up working out in our favor. I do have higher hopes for the Jaguars. We'll see. But I think that hopefully we can roll into this year with the same success that we had last year. So no time wasted. Let's start off from the top with one of my favorite teams to talk about in the offseason, the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson kind of storylines the team and their the biggest moves ahead of this offseason. Obviously, they drafted Richardson last year, but he only played 12 quarters in 2023, but we saw flashes of dynamic playmaker out of him. And so I'm just so excited to see him, his second year development behind Shane Steichen, who's the head coach and the play caller for the Colts. I think he is a mastermind. A lot of people, speaking of taking shit last year, a lot of people also gave me shit about my take on Anthony Richardson, which I get. Brendan's one of them, but I think I'm hoping that everybody saw his potential last year, and I think that it'll really come to fruition this year, barring any health scares. But Colts made a lot of cool moves this offseason. Re-signed Michael Pittman, which is nice. They re-signed Grover Stewart, interior defensive lineman. He is huge for the run game. I think he is great at stopping the run. That's a big component of that defense that we saw when he was out last year. Teams could run all over him, which hasn't been the case for the Colts over the past few years. They not have a great defense, but it's typically not horrible. So big signing, big re-signing for them. And then they drafted, I'm going to get this wrong every time I try, Laitu from UCLA. Latu. He obviously is the edge from UCLA. I think he'll come in and make a splash immediately. And then Adonai Mitchell, that's a big one as well. It's a weapon for Anthony Richardson. He's kind of been a polarizing story due to some of his character and off the field issues, but we saw the Colts front office kind of stymie that and come out strong and say they fully support him. So we saw him make some big plays out of Texas, and hopefully he can make some big plays for Anthony Richardson. I think there's a lot of young talent on this offense that will definitely help Anthony Richardson's development. I think Shane Steichen is relatively happy with what they got. I know obviously you might want more, but I think they can still find a lot of success with the team that they're rolling into. Talking about the offense, again, we just mentioned they drafted Adonai Mitchell. They re-signed Michael Pittman. They're going to have Anthony Richardson back. They'll have Jonathan Taylor, hopefully fully healthy. I mean, they've always had a rock-solid offensive line led by Quentin Nelson. Man, it kind of feels like the bar is set really high for this offense. The ceiling is super high, but I'm kind of worried about the floor here if Anthony Richardson isn't able to perform. Now, me, I think he's going to exceed all expectations. But kind of playing devil's advocate here, if he doesn't, what can we expect out of this offense? Ceiling, floor, what kind of production are you anticipating in 2024 for the Colts?
Yeah, for me, I know you were just a year too early, right? You were a year too early on this call, but I attribute that to AR going down. Was it third game? It was
Something
third
like that.
game, and
I mean,
so
he went down multiple times, and then the
yeah,
third game, I think, was just the final straw. They ruled him out for the rest of the year.
yeah. I just want to put out there that Gardner Minshew came in at quarterback, and they still went 9-8.
Yeah,
They still went 9-8, and I look at Anthony Richardson here in relation to Jalen Hurts and what excuse me, what Chance Steichen did with Jalen Hurts in his second year. And I just really think that it would be, with all the weapons that he has around him, extremely hard to fail. And I really think the sky's the limit with this team. The defense is solid. They have so many weapons on offense run by Shane Steichen through Anthony Richardson. So I really have high expectations for this team. I know I was the opposite last year because I wasn't a believer, but I think as long as AR stays healthy, it'll be really difficult for them to fail. I'm thinking they go over their win total. I know that we'll get to that in a little bit, but I think they beat it by a good bit. So
yeah, it's gonna be fun. I think this is. I don't want to say the team that I'm most excited about, because I am excited about the Texans, of course, but I cannot wait to see Anthony Richardson in this offense. We're going to talk about some win totals here. The Vegas win total for the Colts is 8.5. Their best odds to win the division I found was plus 330 on FanDuel. I think that's actually relatively good odds. And I'll tell you why. Our projections this year actually have the Colts runner up in this division. So contrary to kind of what we're seeing where the Jaguars are the favorites to be the runner up and the Texans are the favorites overall to win the division, the soft model has the Colts, and they actually have the Colts going over by a game at 9.5 wins in 2024. So I know that might shock everybody, but as I'm high on the Colts, I think that the models, it's because the model is high on the Colts. I mean, we see the Colts are extremely efficient on the offensive side of the ball. Last year, they were 15th overall in EPA per play with Gardner Minshew, like you mentioned. I think they do a lot of things well, and I think analytically speaking, they have a lot of advanced metrics that show signs of optimism for this offense, especially if they can get Anthony Richardson in a groove at some point in 2024. That 15th overall EPA per play on the offensive side of the ball led ahead of both the Titans and the Jaguars, surprisingly. So they were more efficient offense than Trevor Lawrence's Jaguars with Gardner Minshew. So I think that should speak volumes. There's a ton more data and metrics that we'll have posted later on as we get closer to the season. But right now, statistically speaking and gut feeling, I think the Colts are going to end up on with a better season than the Jaguars, based on the roster moves, based on the potential that's coming in. And I know that's a bold take, and I don't want to start the show off with some heat, but man, that's my opinion. I'm going to stick to it. I know I was a year too early. I'm confident in it. And again, super excited about this team. Brendan, any closing thoughts before we move on about the Colts?
Yeah, I think this division's wide open. I think that I think the Colts and the Texans, one of the teams are going to win it. In the Beach model, which has no numbers at all, it's just what I think and what I see. I've got the Colts with a ceiling of 12 wins, looking at their schedule. So if they perfect everything in that, I think they can get to that high. We're probably looking more to like 10 to 11, in my opinion. But I think they win the division. I do, and I think that the Texans took such a big jump so fast that I think people are expecting that again, and I don't feel like that is a reality. So I'm thinking that the Colts will be able to get a few more games in them and win this division. I still think those games are going to be so fun. But the Texans is a great squad. But overall, with the division, I like the Colts here as well. And we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I'm glad that we agree.
Yeah, and so it's funny because the win total, what the model says is it has the Colts at 9.5 wins. The model has the Texans at 9.8 wins, so simulated average value. But a lot of people are going to be like, oh, man, that's crazy. But the reason that is looking at last season's projection, weighting Anthony Richardson's, the team's performance with Anthony Richardson under center plays a factor, but also the strength strength of schedule plays a big role in that too. And if you look, the Colts and the Titans are actually tied at 21st for the easiest schedule. But the Texans are tied for fourth for the hardest schedule in the league. And now this is just based off of win percentage from 2023. So the Texans have a opponent average win percentage of 5.26, and the Colts have it at 4.91. So they see easier path to success for the Colts. Now, of course, it's the NFL. The strength of schedule is important to note, but it's not make or break. I was surprised by a lot of people who think strength of schedule is, worthless because you have divisions like the NFC South where guys can win 10 games. Like I think the Falcons are going to win 10 plus games easy. That doesn't mean that they're going to be great, but I mean, of course it plays a huge role, especially for win totals. It just makes no sense to me why you'd argue against that. But yeah, the Texans are going to be a fun conversation. We'll pocket that. Let's go ahead and talk about the Titans. The Titans fired Mike Vrabel. I still cannot get behind that decision to this day. I thought Mike Vrabel was one of the most underrated coaches in the NFL, despite the performance of the Tennessee Titans. I thought the front office was doing him no favors. I mean, I just don't think that they did a good job, especially it all started with the A.J. Brown deal. They dealt A.J. Brown for a ridiculously low price tag, and then they went and signed DeAndre Hopkins subsequently after. It just makes no sense. Like, it's pure negligence by the front office here. So still can't get behind that, but we are where we are. Titans, they hired Brian Callahan, former Bengals offensive coordinator. They brought in Nick Holtz from the Jags, who's a former Jags assistant, to be the offensive coordinator. We'll see about what the offensive makeup's going to look like, who's going to be calling plays and whatnot. But it looks like as of now, Will Levis is going to be the starter. It was a rough year for the Titans last year. Last year, they didn't make the playoffs. They finished the season 6-11. They were 5-4 at home last season. But I mean, after that, in the conference as a whole, they went 4-8. It's just kind of brutal for them. So we're hoping to see a step forward. Now, the key story here is going to be Will Levis's development as a quarterback. It felt like he had a really up and down 2024. Either he played extremely well or he played extremely poor. There was really no in between, from what I saw at least. But as we head into next season, Brendan, are you hot or cold on the Tennessee Titans? What's your snap reaction here? What do you think?
I mean, I'm cold. They can't do a lot worse than they did last year. But that consistency with Levis is really concerning. And I just don't believe that he'll change that in the season. I know they added Calvin Ridley now, and on paper, weapons look good. They got Tony Pollard, who got hurt, and I just think that there's enough holes in this team to where they won't be very successful again. I know their win total is 6.5, correct? If I'm wrong. At least for me, I don't really see them getting to 7 after looking at their schedule. So
let's talk about some of their offseason moves and what we have to be excited about, at least. So maybe what can get them across the finish line. They added J.C. Latham in the first round, offensive line out of Alabama, DeAndre Sweat out of Texas. So that was a big pickup for the defensive line. They also signed Tony Pollard on the offensive side of the ball, Calvin Ridley, and Tyler Boyd. So I think those are, solid pickups. Offensively speaking, that definitely bodes well for Will Levis. Something to be excited about. They also have dynamic running back Tyjae Spears. It does suck that they lost Derrick Henry, but I think it was a good departure for both sides. I think Derrick Henry was ready to play for a competitor at the time, and I think the Titans are ready to just kind of change their style of play. They're ready to get out of the ground and pound style of play. So I think that albeit the loss of Derrick Henry, they still picked up some good guys. They also picked up L'Jarius Sneed at corner, so that's a huge gain for the defense. Yeah. Now it's tough because we don't know what this coaching staff is going to look like, what their tendencies are going to be. We can take some of what they saw or what we saw out of the Bengals given that Brian Callahan was the Bengals offensive coordinator. But, can we really expect Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins style of play out of this offense right off the bat? I don't think so. We'll see if the X's and O's can translate to a similar style of play out of Will Levis and, the guys like DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley. And then this is going to be a big year for Treylon Burks as well. Hopefully he's finally healthy. So they had a good core of wide receivers, running back, a bunch of offensive skill, offensive talent to work with. But again, it all is just decided on the progression of Will Levis in this offense. So I think he's going to have to mature a little bit and, take a step this offseason in the playbook, given that it's a brand new playbook. So we'll see how the development plays out. I'm not sure I'm ready to buy in. I think they have a safe floor, but it's just so hard for me because, Mike Vrabel was a guy who got the most out of his players. I don't know if I can say the same out of Brian Callahan. So this is one of the more ambiguous teams in the AFC South that I really can't stand firm either which way because they have that core talent, but they have a young quarterback who may or may not be able to navigate the ropes in the NFL, and they have a brand new coaching staff. So I think there's going to be growing pains heavy into this. The win total is 6.5. Their odds to win the division is 10-1. I mean, can you comfortably say either which way for either one of those?
I mean, I can't comfortably say that the scheme change I think is good for Levis. I think this scheme change and the departure of Derrick Henry is probably good for the development of Will Levis. I just don't buy into him, and I think that the success of this team is going to come from him. Like it has to come from the quarterback. So we'll see. I mean, it could catch us off guard, but at this point in June, I'm not in. I'm not in on them.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the consensus. But I think at the very least, though, that they have a lot of room for growth. Like if I was a Tennessee Titans fan, I may not necessarily be excited for 2024, but I'm excited for the future because I think that the core is there. But I would like to see some win now if I was a Titans fan. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who's older, Calvin Ridley, who's also older, Tony Pollard, who's, not that old, but for running back years, he's on the older side of things. So you're still working with a lot of older guys who put you in a position to be able to win now. But it hinges on the kind of symbiosis between Will Levis, Brian Callahan, and Nick Holtz. So we'll see. I have faith, but I think they're going to still be more in the latter half of this division in 2024. Not to say I think they're going to win some games that may surprise people. I'll just leave it at that. All right. Hey, let's pivot. Jaguars. I can't even, disappointing season last year. But I will say it wasn't disappointing because we both nailed it with under 9.5 wins for the Jags. We were kind of anticipating a slower season out of this Jaguars team, given, they were missing some key pieces on the defensive side of the ball. We didn't really believe in Trevor Lawrence as much as everybody else did, and we kind of still saw that, I will say, as a more analytical-minded person, a guy who really focuses on the stats, Trevor Lawrence's numbers are so contrasting in a way that it kind of just boggles your memory or your mind a little bit, because he'll have one metric that shows you he's like, wow, this is a really good quarterback, but then he'll have another metric where it's like, what, this is numbers that like bottom end quarterbacks put up in the league. Backups can do better than this. So this is going to be a fun team to talk about at first. They did lose Calvin Ridley, so that's a hit for the offense. They did gain Brian Thomas Jr., so where they kind of lost, they easily replaced. Excuse me. They also drafted Mason Smith out of LSU, big help for the defense. Jarian Jones out of Florida State, big help for the defense as well. They signed Gabe Davis on the offensive side of the ball. They lost Zay Jones, but again, I think the addition of Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis certainly helps. They'll have Evan Ingram right back as well. ETN kind of had an explosion year last year. He really came onto the scene and showed to be a trustworthy product in the run game, so I think they'll just lean right back into that. So I think we'll see the same version of the Jaguars that we saw last year. Really the new key pieces are maybe the different wide receiver core. But, Doug Peterson will be calling the plays. Trevor Lawrence will be manning the offense. He'll be throwing two new weapons. But outside of that, it's really the same. So talking about this team, their Vegas win total is plus 285 to win the division. So that's second highest odds, second best odds, and their over under for the division is 8.5. So that's one less win than last year. So before I kind of jump into what I think and what the model thinks, Brendan, talk to me. What do you think?
Yeah, just to talk a little overview, I think it's pretty hard when you wipe out the entire wide receiver core and bring a whole new one in to kind of start off well at the season. On the other hand, I know that they leaned in super heavily to ETN last year, and it's not real sustainable. He's going to end up getting injured in that. So I would hope that they would kind of limit his load.
Yeah, we got a special guest on the podcast.
So sorry.
Her name is Harley.
Yeah, that's my dog. But let's get her in a minute. But anyway, I just think it's going to be kind of difficult for them to start off well, and I think they need to be really smart about how they limit ETN and get Tank Bigsby in there with a couple reps to try to eliminate injury down the line. I really just think it's going to be about the same as last year. I do have them at 8 wins, so under. I think that it's a pretty good line right there. Nothing, really stands out to me with it, except it's just pretty good. So it'll be difficult. I mean, I don't think they get past 9, but I have them down at 8. So I would take under on that, and I don't think they're going to win the division.
So, yeah, the strength of schedule for the Jags is pretty tough this year. It's tied at 8th overall, so that's on the heavier side. So the average win total from 2023 for the Jags is at 512. It is going to be another year. I really liked what you said about the wide receivers and how difficult it is for a new set of wide receivers to come in and kind of have the same effect. There's a lack of chemistry. There's a lack of knowledge of the playbook that, a more vetted wide receiver on the team may have. So, I think we can attribute some to that. I don't know how much of an effect that'll have. Now it's tough because this division was when the model came out, this division came out similar to how like the AFC North is. That division just kind of beats themselves up. And it's, there's really no, even the Titans, and I would even believe this more so if Mike Vrabel was the coach, but I think the Titans are certainly the weak link in this division. But even the Titans, when they had Mike Vrabel, assuming it's kind of the same core of guys, but they can definitely beat any one of these teams on any given day if all of their playmakers show up motivated and ready to go. Statistically speaking, in terms of offensive EPA, the Titans actually had a higher EPA per play than the Jaguars did last year. And that's with rotating around all the quarterbacks, Ryan Tannehill and Will Levis. So any one of these teams can beat each other on any given day. And I firmly believe that heading into 2024 as well. And so that's why, the win total is right around the 8.5 mark from the model. But that actually put the Jaguars third in the division. As we mentioned, the Colts had a higher win total simulated output. And so I don't want to say I think it's going to be a down year, but I think it's going to be a very similar year with what we saw out of the Jags last year. I don't expect any crazy movement either which way, to be honest with you. So it's kind of not a sexy, exciting take or anything, but 8.5 feels right, if that makes sense. Speaking from the model, speaking from my opinion and just what I think is going to happen next year, I think it's just going to be a very static movement from the Jags, especially with the new wide receiver core. And, I'll have to see it to believe it out of Trevor Lawrence. I'm at this point where he's at the end of his rookie contract. We really haven't seen that elevation, like that big step forward that everybody's been expecting. We've seen small steps forward here and there. We've also seen some small steps back, but I'm not going to believe it until I see it at this point. I've seen enough of Trevor Lawrence to stand firm in my thoughts of, I think the Jaguars are going to be right around 8.5. They may squeeze out 9, but the strength of schedule and the fact that I think the Texans and the Colts are going to have better years than the Jaguars puts me in a solid place to not want to take to think that the win total is not of good value. Same with the odds to win the division. So
yeah, when it comes to the win total, I just want to kind of add this. The way that I look at it, the division games are so hard to predict that unless there is a team that is so dominant over another team, like you pretty much, when I look at it, I pretty much split the division, like, 3-3 because they're home and away against all the other three teams. So really you're looking at the schedule outside of the division to really determine these, in my opinion, to determine these win totals. So that's how I came to that 8 mark. And, a little bit here, a little bit there, maybe the Titans are really bad and they beat them both times. Then that would mean that, then they go over that win total. I just wanted to kind of put that there, but I think that the 8.5 line is pretty on point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting, but are you a believer in Doug Peterson at all? Are you a believer in Trevor Lawrence?
I mean, it's not with this team, man. I mean, they've truly never had any like alpha weapons either. Like Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley had the year off. Like, I mean, if they had like Jamar Chase, they had Justin Jefferson, I think it looks a little bit different. But they just don't have like a dominance on the field. That defenses have to shade to.
Yeah,
that's just what I think. I think that it's definitely doable if they have that.
I go back and forth because Doug Peterson won the Super Bowl.
Yep.
He's a Super Bowl winning head coach now. How much of is attributed to the team itself? How much is that goes towards Doug Peterson? I also, they had Frank Reich and Shane Steichen on staff at the same time. So how much of that goes to them? So it just blows my mind all the time. Like I even waver with myself. I'm like, do I actually think Doug Peterson's a good coach? I don't know. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. And same with Trevor Lawrence. Like I feel like I'll watch a game and I'm like, dang, this guy's kind of good. And then the very next week I'll watch again and I'm like, dude, come on. Like you made better throws at Clemson. What is this? So it's just kind of hard to kind of pick and choose because I feel like these two guys I'm back and forth with, even with myself.
I think Trevor Lawrence elevates the team. I think if they didn't have Trevor Lawrence and they had someone worse than him, that this team would really struggle. Right. I think he really does, but there's a lot more to a team than just one position, even if it is the quarterback. Like if you put the best quarterback in the world on a team with nothing, unless they had Andy Reid calling plays.
I was about to say, you mean Patrick Mahomes with
unless they have Andy Reid calling the plays, man.
Scantling?
Look, Andy Reid is one of a kind. Doug Peterson's no Andy Reid.
Yeah, I mean,
that's all I have to say.
But yeah, Patrick Mahomes won with MVS, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney. Now he did have Travis Kelce, but Travis Kelce is pretty old now, so
he is.
Okay, so let's talk about the most exciting team in the division, according to the public. Maybe not if you ask me, but Texans coming off a wild year. So fun. One of my favorite teams to watch in the league. Head coach D'Amico Ryans, quarterback CJ Stroud. So much things to be excited about it. And I think a lot of people are expecting, another step forward. So that's going to be a question, a point of debate is can they make that same progression again that they did last year? Notable offseason moves. The biggest one that they made, of course, Stephon Diggs, adding him to the wide receiver core. That's huge, I think, for CJ Stroud. Now, we'll see about team chemistry and whatnot, because I do think Nico Collins is still the alpha, and that might be a hot take, but I still think that Nico Collins should be the alpha. And then, of course, they have Tank Dell, the dog, coming back in after getting shot. So I'm assuming he'll be healthy. I've heard good reports. They also added Joe Mixon to the running back core. I think they did actually lose Devin Singletary. He went to the Giants. They also added Ben Skowronek to the wide receiver core. I think he's a good blocking wide receiver.
Like guys.
And then, of course, Daniel Hunter to the defensive end position, who is going to complement Will Anderson really well. Those are the big offseason signings. Same with Jeff Okudah. I think he's pretty big too. We'll see if he ends up starting. But I'm excited about their offseason additions. And what I'm most excited about, they kept offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, PFF guy, by the way, but he was a hot name in the coaching pool last year. And I don't know, I guess kind of the dominoes just fell this way. But I think the final straw was when Dave Canales went to the Panthers, and then that really kind of sealed up everything else. So Bobby Slowick staying with the Houston Texans, giving CJ Stroud a second year in this playbook, comfortable with this team, with this coach, with this play calling, with his tendencies, I think is momentous. And, I've gone back and forth with plenty of people when debating the Texans. I have some people saying like, oh, there's no way they can make that progression again. And then of course, some that are team, like they're definitely going to do it. They're going to win 12 games this year. Watch out. And so I've leaned both ways this offseason. And one of the things that has kind of turned me to, I think the Texans are going to make another jump forward is the fact that they have Bobby Slowick calling the plays yet again. CJ Stroud didn't really lose anything this year. He got all of his weapons back. He kept his offensive coordinator, his play caller, his head coach, and everything. So there's so much to be excited about. I think there's so much going for this Houston Texans team, especially after their wild performance in 2023. Their Vegas win total is currently sitting at 9.5 wins. Their odds to win the division are the best, plus 110 over at BetMGM. Before I get into any more, Brendan, let me know your thoughts on the Houston Texans as we head into 2024.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Harley's excited about it. They did. They only got better and everything. They really didn't lose anything. And it's really exciting to look at. But I just want to come back to something you mentioned earlier about their strength of schedule, as well as their – I just lost my train of thought. As well as wow. Anyway, strength of schedule.
It's tied for fourth.
Yeah, so and their progression, how exponential went last year, and no one thought that. And I think it's very foolish for you to expect that again. I really do. I don't think that happens again like this. And could they win 12 games? Yeah. But I think that the people that think that are thinking that another wild progression is going to happen straightforward. So I still think the Colts take this one. And I think the Texans are going to be really good. I think they'll be a playoff team. And it's going to be really exciting to watch.
So are you standing firm on either the win total or the odds to win the division? Are you taking the odds to win the division? Are you taking the win total over under? What, is there anything in particular?
What's their win total? Is it
9.5? And then the odds to win is basically even money, a little higher than even money.
I think over 9.5 is more likely to hit. I don't like to pick the favorite in anything. I just really think that the Colts will be kind of that team that the Texans were last year, this coming year. And, like you were a year too early on that, and hopefully I'm right on time. But I think it'll be close. But I do think the Colts are going to win. I can't say for certainty. I can't say as certain as I am for the win total. I think they go over the win total. But I think that it'll be close between the Texans and the Colts to take the division. But both playoff teams.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier that their projected win total is only 0.3 from the model higher than the Colts, and that's given that they do have a relatively hard strength of schedule. But, man, I'm such a believer in this team. I know you said you don't think that progression can happen again. Maybe not to the magnitude, but I think that they will take another step forward. And I think that they'll put themselves into familiar territory with the Bills, the Eagles, 49ers, and teams along that nature, the Chiefs. I think that they'll put themselves into elite status this year. I think so. Now, that's kind of a bold statement because that's me assuming they are in the 12-win territory. I think they can get there. I think they're definitely 10 or 11 wins is definitely feasible. The only issue is again, we always circle back to the strength schedule. So they do have a hard stretch, especially to start the year. They have to go to Indianapolis to play the Colts. They play Chicago, who has, brand new team. I think they can definitely get that, but it's not going to be easy. Vikings, Jags, Buffalo, New England, and then they go Green Bay, Colts, Jets, Detroit, Cowboys, and then after that they kind of ease up a little bit. But man, that stretch alone where they play the Packers, the Colts, the Jets, the Lions, the Cowboys, where they go to the Jets and the Cowboys and the Packers, that's going to be tough. Like,
it's going to be really tough.
Really
you're hoping, tough to achieve.
As a coach, you're really, excited if you break even out of that stretch. So, but I think they get close to elite status this year.
Yeah, I think it's definitely in the range of outcomes. They could definitely do it. But this is assuming everything is perfect, right? So, you look at injury, or you look at, I don't know, mostly injury. Like, you can't predict injury, but you obviously have to weigh that into the entirety of the season. So I think like the same ceiling as what I said with the Colts, like a 12, or I don't think they get 13. They can get 12. But we'll just have to see how the season progresses and goes along. And definitely in the range of outcomes.
Yeah, and then they end the season they play at home versus Miami. They go to Kansas City, play the Chiefs. Then they come back home and have to play the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah.
So that 3-game stretch is kind of brutal as well, but a lot to be excited about. I still think they go over. I have them winning the division barely over the Colts. I think the Colts are going to, shoot onto the scene. But I think the Texans are going to be a strong, strong playoff team. They are my pick to win the AFC South. I know, not exciting, not sexy. I don't have anything in particular. I am going to sprinkle some money on the Colts plus 330. I think that's, it's not some like wild odds that you see like 10-1 or anything, but the Colts are going to be good. And I think everybody should kind of gear up and be ready for their happening, because, they're legit. They have a very, very great play caller in Shane Steichen. He was the guy that developed Jalen Hurts into who Jalen Hurts is, contrary to popular belief. And I think we'll see that same type of progression out of Anthony Richardson. So my money is on the Texans or the Colts to win the division. And I don't even think it's that close, if I'm being honest. Beej, man. Any closing remarks? Who's if you're taking one right here, who are you taking to win the division?
Colts.
Wow. Okay. You heard it here. Colts.
You heard it here first, man.
Guys, hey, we appreciate you tuning in, watching our AFC South breakdown. We have plenty more that we'll be releasing the rest of the summer. So, favorite time of the year, guys. We appreciate it. Talk to you guys later.